The city was never truly dark. Even at 3 in the morning, the skyline blazed with lights, skyscrapers glittering like shards of glass thrust into the clouds. From his penthouse balcony, Richard Sterling often looked out at it all with a sense of ownership. The world, in his mind, was his. He had clawed his way up from nothing, or so he told anyone who would listen, until he sat at the top of the food chain, with money, power, and fear at his command. Tonight, however, his sense of control was shaken by the simplest of sounds, the faint scrape of paper, the soft click of a calculator button, and a whisper that didn't belong. Richard frowned, tying the belt of his silk robe tighter as he descended the grand marble staircase. His penthouse was silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioner. He was used to the quiet, the sterile emptiness of wealth. But there it was again, the low murmur of a voice, reading numbers under its breath. At the bottom of the stairs, the sight that met him stopped him cold. There, sitting cross-legged on the polished wooden floor, was a boy. He was young, 15, maybe 16, with smooth, dark skin and short, tightly curled hair. His clothes were plain, a little too big on his lean frame, a gray hoodie, worn jeans, sneakers that had seen better days. Around him was a small island of books, their spines bent and frayed, pages marked with scribbles in pencil. A flashlight lay on the floor beside him, casting a circle of pale yellow light against the darkness. He was working furiously, whispering formulas as he wrote into a battered notebook. Richard's eyes narrowed. He recognized the boy, vaguely one of the evening cleaners perhaps, though he usually tried not to notice them. He paid a company to keep the place spotless, not to leave strays on his floor like vermin. "What the hell is this?" Richard's voice cracked across the stillness like a whip. The boy froze for only a moment, then calmly set his pencil down and looked up. His eyes, dark and steady, met Richard's without flinching. "I finished my work, sir," the boy said quietly. "I was just studying before heading home." "Studying?" Richard barked out a laugh that had no humor in it. "This is my home, not a library. Who gave you permission to sit on my floor like you own the place?" The boy blinked once, unshaken. "No one, sir. I wasn't trying to disrespect you. I just needed a quiet place, my apartment." He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Isn't good for studying," Richard scoffed. "So you thought you'd freeload in the house of a man who could buy and sell your entire building? Pathetic." He gestured at the books scattered like fallen leaves. "Algebra? Physics? You think any of that will get you out of scrubbing floors? Let me give you some advice, boy. People like you should know their place. Don't waste your time pretending you're something you're not." The words dripped with disdain. To Richard, it was nothing more than truth spoken bluntly. He believed the world was divided neatly into those who had power and those who served. But the boy did not shrink. He didn't stammer or scramble to pack his things in shame. He closed one of the books slowly, placed it neatly on the pile beside him, and lifted his chin. "With respect, sir," he said, his voice low but clear. "I did clean. The floors, the counters, the bathrooms, everything is spotless. I worked for my pay. But my dreams? Those don't cost you a dime." The room seemed to tighten with silence. Richard stared at him, unsettled by the calm certainty in his words. The boy wasn't begging. He wasn't apologizing. He was simply stating a fact. "What's your name?" Richard demanded. "Malik Johnson." "Well, Malik Johnson," Richard said coldly, "you're fired. Pack up your trash and get out. And don't think for a second you'll get a reference from me. People like you are a dime a dozen. There will always be another desperate kid willing to mop a floor for minimum wage." Malik rose slowly to his feet, gathering his books with deliberate care. He slipped the battered calculator into his pocket, tucked the notebook under his arm, and straightened his shoulders. "Thank you for the work, sir," he said, his tone respectful, but carrying something else underneath, something quiet and steady. "And for the reminder." Richard scowled. "Reminder of what?" Malik paused at the door, his hand on the knob, and glanced back. His eyes caught the dim light, sharp and intelligent. "Never underestimate the people who are always watching." Then he was gone. Richard stood rooted in place, the words echoing in the vast emptiness of the penthouse. He poured himself a drink, swallowing hard, telling himself it was nothing, just a kid trying to sound clever, trying to scare him with some half-remembered movie line. But when he finally returned to his office upstairs, he noticed the stack of papers he'd left scattered across his desk, documents with numbers, names, and projects he wouldn't want just anyone seeing. And he realized, with a twist in his gut, that the boy had been cleaning this room for months. He had been invisible, quiet, always present. How much had he seen? How much had he heard? Richard tightened his grip on his glass. He prided himself on never being surprised, on always being the one with the upper hand. But tonight, he felt something he hadn't in years. Uncertainty. Malik walked through the cold streets with his books pressed tight to his chest. His sneakers splashed through puddles, his breath misting in the air. He was tired, exhausted from cleaning floors all night and from carrying the weight of dreams no one believed he could reach. But his mind was alive, sharper than ever. He replayed the look on Richard Sterling's face, the billionaire's sneer twisting into unease. Malik hadn't lied. He had been watching, listening, noticing. Every careless word left behind in a drunken phone call. Every deal whispered too loudly into a Bluetooth headset. Every number scribbled on a napkin and left on the counter. He knew things. Things Richard Sterling would never imagine a 15-year-old kid from the wrong side of the city could piece together. Malik smiled faintly to himself as he turned down the cracked pavement toward his neighborhood. He wasn't just cleaning floors. He was building something. And for the first time, Richard Sterling had no idea what was coming. Malik didn't sleep that night. Back in the cramped apartment he shared with his mother and little sister, he spread his books across the kitchen table and worked until the sky outside began to lighten. His mother left for her early nursing shift before dawn, kissing his forehead without noticing the dark circles under his eyes. His sister slept soundly in the room they shared. Malik just kept working, his pencil scratching over paper, numbers unfolding like a secret language only he understood. But in the back of his mind, Richard Sterling's voice lingered. People like you should know their place. It burned, not because Malik believed it, but because he had heard it all before from teachers who didn't expect much, from neighbors who thought dreaming too big was dangerous. He had grown used to those looks, the ones that told him the world had already written his story. But this time was different. Richard's words didn't just dismiss him, they revealed a crack in the world of power. Because Malik had been watching. For months, he'd absorbed details most would overlook. The companies Richard moved money between, the strange names on contracts, the late-night calls where the billionaire thought no one was listening. Malik couldn't connect it all yet, but the pieces were there, and with time, he knew he could put them together. By afternoon, after a few hours of restless sleep, Malik gathered his courage and took the subway to the library downtown. The public library was his sanctuary. Tall shelves, the smell of paper, the silence broken only by turning pages. He sat up at his usual corner table, opened his notebook, and began cross-referencing. At first, it looked like scattered numbers and names, but Malik's mind didn't see noise. It saw patterns. There was one company name that kept appearing: Harborline Development. On contracts, on invoices, on documents, Richard had left carelessly on his desk. Malik had overheard him mention it once in a call, his voice sharp and impatient. If Harborline doesn't move fast enough, we'll lose everything. Harborline, Malik discovered, was supposed to be building affordable housing units across the city, but the numbers didn't add up. Millions were being funneled through the project, yet the construction sites he'd passed on his way to school were still empty lots surrounded by chain-link fences. Something was wrong, and Richard Sterling was at the center of it. As Malik copied details into his notebook, a voice interrupted him. "You know that's not exactly light reading for a teenager." He looked up to see a woman in her late 20s leaning on the opposite side of the table. She wore jeans, a blazer over a simple t-shirt, and glasses that gave her a sharp, intelligent air. Her badge read, "Maya Rodriguez, investigative journalist." Malik blinked. "I wasn't." "Relax," Maya said, sliding into the chair across from him. "I've seen you here before, always with those books, always writing like your life depends on it. And now you're looking up Harborline Development?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's not on the high school syllabus." Malik hesitated. He didn't trust easily, but something in her steady gaze reminded him of his mother, tired but unbreakable. "I used to clean at Sterling's penthouse," he admitted quietly. "I saw things, papers, numbers. They didn't make sense, so I started writing them down." Maya's eyes sharpened. "Richard Sterling?" Malik nodded. "Kid, do you have any idea who you're messing with?" she asked. "He's untouchable. People who've tried to expose him before, let's just say their stories never saw daylight." "I don't care," Malik said, his voice steady. "If he's stealing money meant for people who need homes, someone has to care. And maybe it has to start with me." For a long moment, Maya just studied him. Finally, she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Show me what you've got." Malik slid his notebook across the table. She scanned the page's lines of numbers, names, dates, patterns, only a patient mind could see. When she looked up, her expression had changed. "This is actually good," she admitted. "Very good. You have the instincts of an investigator." "I just see patterns," Malik said with a shrug. "Sometimes that's all it takes to bring down an empire," she said. Meanwhile, across the city, Richard Sterling sat in his office at Sterling Enterprises, reviewing contracts with a scowl. He told himself he wasn't worried about that boy, but the truth was he couldn't shake the image of Malik's calm eyes or his words. Never underestimate the people who are always watching. For the first time in years, Richard felt the sting of vulnerability. He called Marcus, his head of security. "There was a cleaner," Richard said. "Kid. Fired him the other night. Find out who he is, where he lives. I don't want him near me or my business again." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, but the drink in his hand didn't steady him like it used to. He couldn't explain it, but he felt as though a shadow had slipped into his empire. Small, quiet, but watching. That evening, Malik returned home to find his sister waiting, with her homework spread across the table. She looked up at him, her braids falling into her eyes. "Malik, can you help me with math?" she asked. He sat down beside her, exhaustion tugging at him, but he smiled anyway. "Of course." As he explained fractions to her, something clicked inside him. This was why he couldn't stop. Not just for himself, for his family. For kids like his sister who deserved a future where people like Richard Sterling couldn't steal everything and walk away smiling. After she went to bed, Malik opened his notebook again. Tomorrow, he would meet Maya at the library. Together, they'd start connecting the dots. And somewhere across the city, Richard Sterling was already moving pieces to protect himself. Neither of them knew it yet, but the battle lines were being drawn between a billionaire who thought himself untouchable and a 15-year-old boy who refused to stay invisible any longer. The next morning, Malik arrived at the library early, his notebook clutched tightly under his arm. He wasn't used to trusting strangers, but something about Maya had felt different. She hadn't laughed at him or dismissed him. She'd seen the same patterns he had, and she wanted to dig deeper. For the first time, Malik felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of his discoveries alone. Maya appeared not long after, coffee in one hand, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She slid into the seat across from him. "Morning, detective," she said with a faint smile. Malik flushed. "I'm not a detective. You're better," she countered. "You're invisible, and that's a dangerous gift." She pulled out her laptop, opened a few files, and gestured to his notebook. "All right, show me again." Together they went over the numbers. Harbor Line Development had received millions in city contracts, supposedly for affordable housing. Yet Malik had documented payments going out to shell companies with names like Blue Sky Consulting and North Star Logistics. "These companies don't even exist on paper," Maya muttered as she typed rapidly. "Or if they do, they're registered in places like the Cayman Islands. Classic laundering scheme. Sterling is moving money meant for housing projects into his own pockets." Malik nodded. "I thought so. And he leaves things out where anyone can see them. It's like he thinks he's too powerful to be caught." "He does," Maya agreed grimly. "People like him think rules are for everyone else." For hours they worked, cross-referencing Malik's notes with public records. Slowly, the picture became clearer. Richard Sterling was stealing money from the very people who needed it most. "This is big," Maya finally said, leaning back. "If we can prove it, this could blow open everything. The city, the press, even the feds would have to take notice." Malik stared at the pages before him, his chest tightening. "So, what do we do next?" "We dig deeper," Maya said, "and we stay quiet. Sterling has ears everywhere. If he suspects anyone's onto him, he'll bury the evidence and make sure whoever's asking questions disappears." Malik swallowed hard. He thought of his sister asleep in their tiny apartment, of his mother working double shifts at the hospital. If Sterling came after him, but then he remembered the look on his sister's face when she'd asked him to help with her math homework, how much she believed in him. He couldn't walk away. "Okay," Malik said firmly. "Let's do it." Across town, Richard Sterling wasn't sitting idly either. Marcus, his head of security, dropped a folder on his desk. "Malik Johnson," Marcus reported. 15 years old, lives with his mother and younger sister in a low-income housing complex. Straight-A student, especially in math and science. Teachers say he's gifted, never been in trouble, kids clean. Richard flipped through the pages, his scowl deepening. "And yet, he thinks he can threaten me." Marcus shifted. "Sir, he's just a boy. Maybe he was bluffing. I doubt he has anything." "Don't be stupid," Richard snapped. "The smart ones are always the quiet ones. If he's been watching me for months, he's seen things, maybe more than I realized." He poured himself a drink, his hand shaking slightly. "Find out who he's talking to. I want to know if he's shared anything. And if he has, his eyes hardened. Make sure it stops there. Marcus nodded. Understood. Back at the library, Malik and Maya packed up their things as evening settled in. She slid her laptop into her bag and looked at him seriously. You need to be careful, Malik. Sterling won't take kindly to this. He has money, power, connections. If he feels cornered, he'll come after you. Malik hesitated, then said, He already fired me. He doesn't care about me. That's exactly why you're dangerous to him, Maya said. He thinks you're nobody. If you turn out to be somebody who can hurt him, he'll try to erase you. Her words lingered with him on the subway ride home. When Malik stepped off at his stop, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He pulled his hoodie tighter and hurried through the dark streets toward his building. The next day, Maya invited him to her office, a cramped corner in the back of a community newspaper. The place was cluttered with stacks of files, old headlines tacked to the walls, and the hum of an overworked printer. This is where the magic happens, Maya said dryly. Not exactly the New York Times, but we tell stories no one else will touch. She handed him a soda and gestured to a desk piled with documents. I'm filing a Freedom of Information request for the Harbor Line contracts. If we can match Sterling's payments to those shell companies, we'll have proof. Malik nodded, flipping through the papers. I can help organize. I'm good with numbers. I noticed, she said with a smile. They worked late into the night, piecing together the trail. Malik's sharp eyes caught details Maya missed. A misspelled name here, a duplicated invoice there. Slowly, the puzzle came together. But outside the building, a black SUV idled, its tinted windows reflecting the glow of the streetlights. Marcus sat inside, watching, reporting back to Sterling. You were right, he said into the phone. The kid's working with a journalist. Then ended, Sterling hissed. The next evening, Malik walked home from the library with his backpack slung over one shoulder. The streets were quiet, too quiet. He was halfway down an alley shortcut when a figure stepped out of the shadows. Malik Johnson? The man asked. Malik froze. Before he could answer, another man appeared behind him. Malik's heart raced. He bolted, his sneakers pounding against the pavement. He weaved through trash cans, lapped over a broken fence, his lungs burning. He could hear footsteps pounding behind him. Closer, closer. But Malik knew these streets better than anyone. He ducked into a narrow passage only kids from the neighborhood used, scrambled up a fire escape, and crouched on the rooftop, heart hammering. Below, the men cursed and retreated. Malik sat trembling, the night air cold in his lungs. Sterling had found him, and he wouldn't stop. When he finally made it home, his mother was asleep, his sister curled beside her. Malik slipped into their room, staring at their peaceful faces. He realized then that this wasn't just about numbers on a page anymore. It was about survival, his and theirs. The next morning, he met Maya at the library, his face pale, but his eyes burning with determination. They know, he said. Sterling sent people after me last night. Maya's jaw tightened. Then we're on to something big. Too big for him to ignore. That means we're close. Malik nodded slowly. Then we keep going. No matter what. Because for Malik, this wasn't just about bringing down a billionaire anymore. It was about proving that even the invisible could make the world see the truth. The following week was a blur of tension. Malik could feel it in the way the black SUV seemed to appear near his block more often, in the shadows that lingered too long when he left the library. Sterling's men were watching, waiting, but Malik refused to stop. Every night, he and Maya pored over documents, finding more threads that tied Sterling to the Harbor Line scandal. Fraudulent invoices, fake companies, money transfers hidden through offshore accounts. It was all there, buried under arrogance and paperwork. "We almost have enough," Maya said one evening, her tired eyes glowing with excitement. "If we get one solid witness, just one person from inside Harbor Line willing to talk, this story will explode." Malik leaned forward. "What if I can get us more than that?" Maya frowned. "Malik, what are you thinking?" He hesitated, then pulled out a scrap of paper. On it was a list of names he'd overheard in Sterling's penthouse, executives, middlemen, even a city councilman. He left these lying around. "I don't know who all of them are, but I think some work directly for Harbor Line. If I can get close to one of them." "Absolutely not," Maya cut in. "You're 15. If Sterling suspects you're digging this deep, you won't just get fired this time. You'll get hurt." Malik's jaw tightened. "They already came after me. They tried to corner me last week. If I do nothing, my family's still in danger. If I help you finish this, maybe we stop him for good." Maya stared at him, torn between fear and admiration. "You've got more courage than half the people I know," she said quietly. "But promise me you'll be careful." Meanwhile, in his glass-walled office high above the city, Richard Sterling raged. "Why hasn't this been handled?" he barked at Marcus. "He's a child, and yet he's threatening to undo everything I've built." Marcus shifted uneasily. "The kid's smart, knows the streets, slips away every time. And that journalist, she's the real problem. She's giving him a platform." "Then silence her," Sterling snapped. But Marcus didn't move right away. Something in his eyes flickered doubt, perhaps even guilt. Sterling noticed and narrowed his gaze. "Don't tell me you're losing your nerve," Richard hissed. "We're in too deep to let sentiment get in the way. Do your job." Marcus gave a stiff nod. But as he left the office, the weight of Sterling's words lingered. 2 nights later, Malik sat in the back of the library with Maya, his notebook open, when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. A low, hurried voice came through. "You don't know me, but I work for Harbor Line. I've seen what Sterling's doing. He's stealing everything. Millions meant for homes. Meet me tomorrow night, 11, Pier 9. The line went dead. Malik's heart raced as it relayed the call to Maya. "It could be a setup," she warned. "Or it could be the break we need," Malik said. After a long pause, Maya nodded. "We'll go together." The next night, the docks were empty and cold, the water black under the moonlight. Malik and Maya waited near Pier 9, their breath visible in the air. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a worn suit, his face lined with worry. "My name's Daniel," he said quickly. "I handled accounts for Harbor Line. At first I thought it was just sloppy bookkeeping, but then I saw Sterling moving money into offshore accounts. I tried to speak up once. They threatened my family." Maya's recorder was already running discreetly. "We can protect you if you go on the record," she said. Daniel shook his head. "Sterling has people everywhere. You don't understand." Suddenly, headlights flared at the end of the pier. A black SUV roared toward them. Doors flew open and men spilled out, their faces hard, their movements purposeful. "Run!" Malik shouted. The 3 of them bolted down the pier, footsteps thundering behind them. Malik's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him forward. One of the men lunged, grabbing his backpack. Malik twisted free, leaving it behind, and sprinted toward the side stairs leading up to the street. Maya pulled him into an alley, their breaths ragged. Daniel staggered after them, pale and trembling. "They'll kill us," he gasped. "No," Maya said, her voice fierce. "We're not letting them win." The next morning, Sterling opened his email to find his nightmare waiting. Front-page headlines blared across the city. Billionaire Richard Sterling implicated in Harborline development fraud. Maya had worked through the night, piecing together Daniel's testimony with Malik's notes and the financial documents they had uncovered. The story spread like wildfire, picked up by larger outlets within hours. Sterling's phone lit up with calls, investors pulling out, city officials demanding answers, reporters swarming his building. He slammed his fist on his desk, roaring with rage. That boy! At school, Malik sat in the back of his math class, his notebook open, when his teacher whispered for him to step outside. 2 men in suits stood waiting, but not Sterling's men. These wore badges. "Malik Johnson?" one asked. "We're with the FBI. Would like to talk about what you've uncovered." Malik's heart pounded. He glanced through the classroom door, saw his sister's class across the hall. For a moment, fear gripped him, but then he remembered Maya's words. Sometimes it just takes one person to bring down an empire. He nodded. "Okay, let's talk." By week's end, Richard Sterling's empire was crumbling. Harborline's accounts were frozen, his associates arrested, and Sterling himself was facing indictments for fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. The man who once believed himself untouchable was now cornered, his power unraveling before the eyes of the world. In a small community newspaper office, Maya printed out the final edition of their story. Malik sat beside her. Exhaustion etched into his face, but his eyes shone with quiet pride. "You did this," Maya said softly. "We did this," Malik corrected. She smiled. "You know, most kids your age worry about exams. You just helped take down a billionaire." Malik shrugged, though a small grin tugged at his lips. "Guess I passed a different kind of test." That evening, Malik returned home to find his mother waiting at the kitchen table. She had the newspaper in her hands, her eyes full of tears. "You," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You did this." Malik lowered his head. "I just couldn't let him keep stealing. Not when people like us need those homes." His mother stood, pulling him into her arms. "I always told you you were meant for more, Malik. And now the whole world knows it too." His sister peeked out from their room, holding her math book. "Will you still help me with homework?" she asked. Malik laughed, the tension of the past weeks finally breaking. "Always." Weeks later, Malik stood on the library steps with Maya, looking out at the city skyline. "Sterling's trial will take months, maybe years," she said. "But the important part is, he's not untouchable anymore." Malik nodded. "And people will know the truth. That matters." She studied him for a moment. "What about you? What's next?" He looked down at the notebook in his hands, worn, scribbled full of patterns, ideas, dreams. "I keep studying, keep watching, because there's always more to see. And maybe someday, I'll build something better than the world Sterling tried to buy." Maya smiled. "I think you already have." As Malik walked home through the city streets, the winter air crisp around him, he felt lighter than he had in years. He was still just a 15-year-old boy from the wrong side of town, but he was no longer invisible. He had a voice, he had a purpose, and he had proven that even the smallest spark could set fire to an empire built on lies.